Good morning, St. Joseph class. Sing along when you get to know the words.
There are 50 states in America. 50 states in America. There are 50 states in the United States of America. Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, California, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, Florida, Georgia, Hawaii, Idaho, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, Minnesota, Mississippi, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, Nevada, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York, North Carolina, North Dakota, Ohio, Oklahoma, Oregon, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, South Carolina, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, Vermont, Virginia, Washington, West Virginia, Wisconsin, Wyoming.
There are 50 states in America. 50 states in America. There are 50 states in the United States of America.
There are 50 states in the United States of America.
Yeehaw! And those, ladies and gentlemen, are the 50 states of the United States of America. Now, before we go any further today, we didn't actually get to finish the first chapter of The Indian in the Cupboard on Monday. So I just thought we'd start today by finishing that first chapter. Now, if you remember, Omri had been given a little Native American action figure by his friend Patrick for his birthday. He'd put the figure into a little cupboard that his brother Gillen had given him, locked it with a special key that his mum had given him, but the next morning he'd been woken up by some sounds coming from the cupboard, and he opened the cupboard only to discover that the figure had come to life. And we last left off Omri reaching over to try to pick him up. "I won't hurt you," he said. "I only want to pick you up." The Indian opened his mouth, and a stream of words spoken in that loud, tiny voice came out, not one of which Omri could understand. But he noticed that the Indian's strange grimace never changed. He could speak without closing his lips. "Don't you speak English?" asked Omri. "All the Indians in the films spoke a sort of English. It would be terrible if this Indian couldn't. How would they talk to each other?" The Indian lowered his knife a fraction. "I speak," he grunted. Omri breathed deeply in relief. "Oh, good. Listen, I don't know how it happened that you came to life, but it must be something to do with the cupboard, or perhaps the key. Anyway, here you are, and I think you're great. I don't mind that you stabbed me. Only, please, can I pick you up? After all, you are my Indian," he finished in a very reasonable tone. He said all this very quickly, while the Indian stared at him. The knife point went down a little further, but he didn't answer. "Well, can I? Say something," said Omri impatiently. "I speak slowly," grunted the miniature Indian at last. "Oh," Omri thought, and then said very slowly, "Let me pick you up." The knife came up again in an instant, and the Indian's knees bent into a crouch. "No." "Oh, please." "You touch, I kill," the Indian growled ferociously. You might have expected Omri to laugh at this absurd threat from a tiny creature, scarcely bigger than his middle finger, armed with only a pinpoint. But Omri didn't laugh. He didn't even feel like laughing. This Indian, his Indian, was behaving in every way like a real live Red Indian brave, and despite the vast difference in their sizes and strengths, Omri respected him, and even, odd as it sounds, feared him at this moment. "Oh, okay, I won't then. But there's no need to get angry. I don't want to hurt you." Then, as the Indian looked baffled, he said, in what he supposed was Indian English, Me no hurt you. You come near, I hurt you," said the Indian swiftly. Omri had been half lying in bed all this time. Now cautiously and slowly he got up. His heart was thundering in his chest. He couldn't be sure why he was being cautious. Was it so as not to frighten the Indian, or because he was frightened himself? He wished one of his brothers would come in, or better still his father, but no one came. Standing in his bare feet, he took the cupboard by its top corners and turned it till it faced the window. He did this very carefully, but nevertheless the Indian was jolted, and having nothing to hold on to, he fell down. But he was on his feet again in a second, and he had not let go of his knife. "Sorry," said Omri. The Indian responded with a noise like a snarl. There was no more conversation for the next few minutes. Omri looked at the Indian in the early sunlight. He was a splendid sight. He was about 7 centimetres tall. His blue-black hair, done in a plait and pressed to his head by a coloured headband, gleamed in the sun. So did the minuscule muscles of his tiny naked torso and the reddish skin of his arms. His legs were covered with buckskin trousers, which had some decoration on them too, which was too small to see properly, and his belt was a thick hide thong, twisted into a knot in front. Best of all somehow were his moccasins. Omri found himself wondering, not for the first time recently, where his magnifying glass was. It was the only way he would ever be able to see and appreciate the intricate embroidery or beadwork or whatever it was which encrusted the Indian's shoes and clothes. Omri looked as closely as he dared at the Indian's face. He expected to see paint on it, war paint, but there was none. The turkey feather which had been stuck in the headband had come out when the Indian fell and was now lying on the floor of the cupboard. It was about as big as the spike on a conker, but it was a real feather. Omri suddenly asked, "Were you always this small?" "I know small. You big," the Indian shouted angrily. "No," began Omri, but then he stopped. He heard his mother beginning to move about next door. The Indian heard it too. He froze. The door of the next room opened. Omri knew that at any moment his mother would come in to wake him for school. In a flash, he had bent down and whispered, "Don't worry, I'll be back." And he closed and locked the cupboard door and jumped back into bed. "Come on, Omri, time to get up," Mum said. She bent down and kissed him, paying no attention to the cupboard, and went out again, leaving the bedroom door wide open. So, that's the end of chapter 1, and the adventure begins. Now, our adventure today is learning about Native Americans, different tribes, but more importantly, which states, which parts of the United States of America, as it is now, did they come from way back when and then. So just let me get set up, and if I can move this little fella so you can now see the screen. Now the good thing about this screen is, being on YouTube, you can pause the screen. So if I go too fast, you can rewind and pause until you have time to look and learn and take in the information. So as you can see here, we have a map similar to the one that we just sang about, the United States of America. But this one's special because it's different. It shows where each American Indian tribe originated from, and also what they called the land as well. And as you can see, it says Native Americans were often grouped into tribes or nations. These groupings were generally based on peoples that shared the same culture, language, religion, customs, and politics. There are over 1,000 Native American tribes in the United States. Now, this is the tribe that our Native American comes from, the Iroquois. And they come from, it's towards the east of America, the northeast area it's called, or the northeast woodlands. It includes the Iroquois Indians of New York, the Wapani, and the Shawnee. So those are some of the near 1,000 native tribes of America. So the Iroquois were a league or confederacy of tribes. So they were made up of smaller groups to make one big union. They were in the northeastern part of America. Originally, they were formed by 5 tribes: the Cayuga, the Onondaga, Mohawk, Seneca, and Oneida. Later in the 1700s, the Tuscarora tribe joined. So here you can see this is where the Seneca tribe lived, the Cayuga, the Onondaga, the Tuscarora, who joined in the 1700s, the Oneida, and the Mohawks. So all of those combined to make one bigger union. The French named them the Iroquois, but they called themselves the Haudenosaunee, which means people of the Longhouse. The British called them the Five Nations, but here we can see the Six Nations that formed in the 1700s. The Seneca, the Cayuga, the Onondaga, the Oneida, the Mohawk, and the Tuscarora. The Iroquois had a type of representative government. Each tribe in the Iroquois League had its own elected officials, called chiefs. These chiefs would attend the Iroquois Council, where major decisions were made regarding the Five Nations. Each tribe also had its own leaders to make local decisions. The Iroquois lived in longhouses. Now, this was quite a revelation discovery to me. I thought originally that all Native Americans lived in teepees or wigwams, but they don't. The Iroquois lived in longhouses. These were long rectangular buildings made with wood frames and covered with bark. They were sometimes over 100 feet long. They didn't have any windows, just a door at each end and holes in the roof to let smoke from cooking fires out. Many families would live in a single long house. Each family would have its own compartment that could be separated from the others for privacy using a partition made of bark or animal skin. Longhouses were part of a larger village. A village would have several longhouses, which would often be surrounded by a fence called a palisade. Outside of the palisade would be the fields where the Iroquois would farm crops. The men of the Iroquois nation shaved their heads, except for a strip down the middle. Even though this is called a Mohawk haircut today, many of the Iroquois tribesmen, not just the Mohawk, cut their hair like this. Girls would wear two braids in their hair until they got married. Then they would have a single braid. Now, Iroquois, I've put it phonetically there for you, so it's pronounced Iroquois. And they lived in the area that is now known as New York State. If we look here at our map of the United States of America, if we look over to the East Coast and up a little bit, we can see New York. New York State is right there. But my challenge to you is, can you find the home states of these other Native American tribes? There are 14 that I'd like you to find. And I'm going to upload the maps. So there's some maps that are blank, some maps with some clues that can help you. And I'll upload those to the tile today. So number one, we can see in New York, or New York State, the Iroquois lived. So your challenge is to find the home states of these Native American tribes. The states being New York, Minnesota, North Dakota, Washington, Idaho, California, Arizona, Colorado, Nebraska, Texas, Louisiana, Florida, Tennessee, and Virginia. Now, just some more information about those 14 states. We can see here the number one state we need to find, which we should know already where it is New York. And the Iroquois came from New York. The capital of the state, so the state capital is called Albany. New York became a state. It was the original, one of the originals. It was the 11th state of the United States back in 1788. It became a state on July the 26th, 1788. And it's also known as the Empire State. If you think about the Empire State Building, which is right slap bang in the middle of New York City. Number two is Minnesota, where the Sioux tribe are from. The state capital is St. Paul. It became the 32nd state of the USA on May the 11th, 1858. There you can see its flag, and it's also known as the land of 10,000 lakes. Washington is where the Chinook tribe came from. The state capital is Olympia. Now, Washington became the 42nd state on November the 11th, 1889, and it's also known as the Evergreen State. North Dakota, home of the Cree tribe. State capital, Bismarck. It became the 39th state on November the 2nd, 1889. It's also known as the Peace Garden State. Number 5, state of Idaho, where the Nez Perce come from. Capital is Boise. It became the 43rd state on July the 3rd, 1890. And it's also known as the Gem State. California, home of the Chumash. State capital, Sacramento, became the 31st state on September the 9th, 1850, also known as the Golden State. The state of Arizona, where the Navajo tribe come from. State capital is Phoenix. It became the 48th state on February the 14th, so Valentine's Day, in 1912, and it's known as it's home to, the Grand Canyon State. Number 8, the state of Colorado, where the Ute tribe are from. State capital, Denver. It became the 38th state on August the 1st, 1876, also known as the Centennial State. Nebraska, home of the Cheyenne. State capital, Lincoln, became the 37th state on March the 1st, 1867, also known as the Cornhusker State. Texas, state of Texas, home of the Kiowa tribe. State capital is Austin, became the 28th state on December the 29th, 1845, also known as the Lone Star State, due to the fact that there is one Lone Star on the state flag. Number 11, Louisiana, which does have a French connection. Maybe you can find out what that French connection is. It's where the Choctaw tribe came from. The state capital is a place called Baton Rouge. It became the 18th state on April the 30th, 1812, and it's also known as the Pelican State. Number 12, the state of Florida, where the Calusa tribe came from. State capital is Tallahassee. It became the 27th state on March the 3rd, 1845, also known as the Sunshine State. Tennessee, home of the Cherokee tribe. State capital is Nashville, famous for country music. Became the 16th state on June the 1st, 1796. So a very old part of the Union there. And it's called the Volunteer State. And finally, the state of Virginia, home of the Powhatan tribe. State capital is Richmond. Became the 10th state on June the 25th, 1788. Also known as the Old Dominion State. So you can see, this is one of the maps that will upload onto the tile. So the states are listed, the names of the native tribes are listed, but can you find where each of these tribes came from, according to where the state is in the map of the United States of America? And if you want to, an additional challenge, I'll also add a map to the tile that has a list of all 50 states. So there's that one with no names on it. That one to give you a few clues. And to finish, if you want to watch and listen to that song again, if you pause this screen, that is the link to the 50 States in America song. So a lot to take in, I know, but I got quite excited finding out about it, so I hope you do too. And get singing, get learning, and just see how many states of America can you name, how many homes of the Native American tribes can you find, and maybe as a special super duper challenge, can you list the states and maybe all of the state capitals too? Okay, so lots to be getting on with. Have fun, and I'll see you soon. Bye for now.